What's up, my friends, and welcome into the PSU All Nittany Lion podcast, year number 2. Hello, and welcome back. It is great to be with you. Myself, Tyler Zulli, Fran Duffy, along with us this year, our NFL draft expert and part of our PHLY Eagles show. So I am super, super excited to be with Fran for this season as well, because not only are we going to get some awesome college insight, but as we get closer and closer to the NFL draft, you're going to get some crossover between the Penn State show and the NFL draft coverage as well. So first and foremost, Fran, I am super excited to be with you for this entire Penn State football season, which should be a really good one.
Yeah, Tyler, I'm excited, man. I mean, I stuck my toe in a little bit last fall. I know I jumped on the show 2 or 3 times throughout the course of the season, but I'm really excited to dive into this Nittany Lions team that a lot of people have very high expectations for. And I know we put it in the thumbnail that this is a potential title contender. I think most analysts going into the season, They've got Penn State as a Final Four team, as a team that's going to have a bye going into the college football playoff. So very high expectations for James Franklin in this unit, and for good reason. It's a really talented team on both sides of the ball.
And of course, we are broadcasting live from the Xfinity mobile studios. The All Nittany Lion podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Branded Bills. Use the promo code BBPHLY at brandedbills.com for 15% off your first order. Fran, I don't know if you got any hats, but I got a couple on the way. They have some really, and I don't say that because they're paying us to. They have some really nice hats and some really nice collection of stuff. So if you're a hat person like me, Fran, your hairline's a whole lot better than mine. So you may not be a hat guy, but the hats are awesome.
No, as soon as we partnered up with Branded Bills, went over to their website and just checked it out. And that campus collection with Penn State is fantastic. But then you dive in and even if you've got family and friends that are, that went to different colleges, there's a whole huge spread there. And then they've got all the different kinds of hats you could ask for. So really excited to be partnered up with Branded Bills here for this show.
All right, so let's jump into things, because the headline, it's not meant to be clickbait. It's not meant to be deceiving. This is truly a team that should have national title aspirations, ranked somewhere either second or third, but by most polling platforms. It's them, it's Texas, it's Clemson, it's those types of teams that are kind of routinely coming up within the top 5 or top 10. And as a new season is set to unfold, I think that the natural place to start for a team that has title aspirations is to ask the question, why? And I think when you look at Penn State, the why is part of what they did last year, which was maybe a little unexpected. Obviously, they had a little bit of an ascension towards the back half of the season. They end up going to the Big Ten title game because Ohio State loses to Michigan, lose to Oregon, which, Fran, I've said for a while may have been the best blessing they could have asked for, because then they end up getting SMU in the first round, who they handle fairly easily, Boise State in the second round, who they handle fairly easily, and then finally they run into Notre Dame, which was a really good football game by all accounts, and 2 very similarly matched teams. But this was a team who last year had pretty good to really good expectations. And now you put that end of the season, now you have a team with national title aspirations because of the fact that they are returning 14 of their 22 starters. And in the college football landscape, that's a really tough thing to ask. It is now the 7th most returning starters in all of college football from a season ago.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, even though you lose a couple of blue chip players, a couple of first round picks, that's the price of doing business in college football. You're going to lose talent, but how much can you retain? And that was a big storyline last year for who the eventual national champions for the Ohio State Buckeyes was. All right, well, yeah, they lost some players to the draft, but look at the players that they retained. And they were so much made about all the money that they spent from an NIL standpoint, not just to go out and you get a Caleb Downs and you get these guys. Yes, you got some contributions from a great freshman receiver in Jeremiah Smith, but they paid a lot of those guys that were homegrown talent to stay on campus. And that is a big theme for this Penn State team. You look at keeping Drew Allar, keeping both running backs, Singleton and Kaytron Allen, keeping that offensive line intact from a year ago. You keep Dennis Sutton, you keep Tony Rojas and Zane Duran, you go down the line, AJ Harris. So you have a lot of these guys that stayed in-house, that maybe had opportunities to go elsewhere in the portal or to go into the 2025 NFL draft. You keep that talent at State College in Happy Valley. Now you're cooking with gas. You make a couple of these additions that they made this spring, if they're able to hit, there's a reason why a lot of people think that the arrow is pointing up on this team.
There was a lot of feel of when you bring up those guys that decided to return as opposed to either hit the portal or go to the NFL draft, because you have two running backs that we're going to talk about who finished 34th and 35th, I believe, in rushing yards respectively in college football. And either one of them probably could have been a 1,600 rusher if they were a lead back somewhere else. But it felt like there was a lot of jobs not finished feel to the returnees that were coming back between Singleton and Kaytron Allen, with guys like Dennis Sutton, as you brought up. And of course, yes, losing Tyler Warren hurts, losing Abdul Carter hurts. And we'll talk more about them later in the show of how we're going to, how you would replace them heading into 2025. But the talent that has returned to this team, 9 starters on offense, 5 starters on defense, I think that is a really important factor for a team that knocked on the doorstep of appearing in the national title game and maybe was a drive or two away, swings a different way between them and getting to the national title game and playing Ohio State for the national championship.
Yeah, and we know how college football goes. I mean, it's a small sample. We are to a point where you're not on the edge of your seat where you need to win every single game, right? With so many teams making it into the playoff, but you still need to make sure that you win some of those tight games, because if it goes the other way, you could be what Kansas was last year. We just watched Kansas in week 0 just beat the brakes off of Fresno State, right? They put 50 points up on the board. Last year, that team was like 3-7 in one-score games, right? And so if you flip that, you go the other way, that's a whole different discussion with Kansas, which is now playing for a Big 12 title potentially. Penn State, you obviously you don't expect it to go to that other extreme, but I think when you're looking at this Nittany Lions team, one of the big question marks that everyone has had, all right, when you're going up against the best of the best, the best opponents, the most talented opponents on the schedule, can you win those tight games against those talented opponents when they come to town? And so that is going to be the big question, certainly, that this team will have to answer this fall.
So you bring up Lance Leopold's Kansas team, which is a brilliant place to transition to. The offensive coordinator who used to be at Kansas, now in his second year at Penn State, is Andy Kotelnicki. And the one thing with him that a lot of people have raved about is his creativity, his ability to get players in space, his ability to beat matchups, his ability to kind of be scheme-proof, if you will. And of course, that certainly helps when you have really good players. And I think that starts with the quarterback, and I think that's where we probably naturally will begin any type of season conversation, is with the quarterback, with Drew Allar returning for another season. Could have been an NFL draftee. I think, you talked about him a lot. Maybe realized he wasn't going to be a first-round pick, realized that he had better chance of being one if he returned to the college game. But this is a quarterback who last year had the 17th most passing yards in college football, 24 touchdowns to just 8 interceptions, a near 67 completion percentage, 153.5 QB rating, rushed for over 300 yards and 6 touchdowns. And to me, Fran, when I watched Drew Allar, it was weird that I looked at his numbers from last year and they were better, obviously numerically, than a season ago, with the exception of the interceptions. He went from 2 to 8. But I watched a quarterback who grew. I watched a quarterback who matured from a guy who was so unwilling to make the mistake that he held onto the football quite a bit in 2 years ago, in 2023, to last year, a guy who was willing to take more shots, was willing to go over the middle of the field, and was willing to extend the play to try to find an open receiver. I think outside of the numbers, which were pretty good last year for Allar, he wasn't asked to do 1,000,000% of the offense, but he was asked to be, obviously the game manager of the team. I thought the maturation of the quarterback position itself was a pretty big step for Drew Allar last year.
Yeah, I think if you were to watch Allar in 2023 and you were to look at it like a meter of 0 to 10, right, in terms of the aggressiveness scale, in 2023 he was at like a 1 or a 2. And I agree with you. You wanted to see him turn that dial up. And last year I thought he dialed that up to like a 4 or a 5. I want him to get to like 6, 7, 8. Like that's kind of honestly watching him again here this summer and going back and digging through the film. So many people have pointed to that interception, the game-ending interception against Notre Dame at the end of the game, the dig route backside. To me, like, I'm putting that interception much more in the hands of the receiver as opposed to Allar. Could the ball have been a little bit better? Does it excuse away the interception he threw to the tight end and the left pylon earlier in the game? Like, no, that was a bad throw. But to me, like, I want to see him take more of those chances in those tighter windows, push the limits a little bit more. I think that he is a quarterback in Drew Allar where he is, I don't want to say like too smart for his own good. Like, he knows where all the answers are in that offense, and he wants to play it safe and stay on schedule. I'd love to be able to see him, a guy with his ability. I want to just see him kind of turn up the urgency meter just a little bit more. I will say, like, as a physical talent, he's impressive. He checks all of the boxes you're looking for. I just feel like anytime I've watched him, something's been missing. And one of the numbers that a lot of people have been pointing to this offseason is the fact that he failed to crack 60% completion in the conference title game or any of the any of the playoff games from last year, right? So the big moments against the best teams, going back to that narrative we talked about earlier, he didn't show up. A lot of factors come into play there. You get into throwaways and pressure and drops. Certainly, the receivers not coming through for him. I think that receiver room went over a major overhaul. We'll get into that here in this episode. But to me, for Allar, if he's got more faith in those receivers this year to come through and make plays for him, I'm hoping that then results in him willing to take more chances and put those guys in position where, hey, you know what? Go make a play for me, Trevor Pena, right? Or whoever this player is that I'm targeting on this play. It can't just be the Tyler Warren show that it was in 2024. That's gonna be by necessity here this year, which again we'll talk about.
Yeah, I think that there's a clear understanding that you lose probably. I think it's fair to say Penn State lost their two best players this year, which is hard to do and continue to replicate your success. And that's why, as you brought up, the guys that come in, the transfer portal receivers, the tight ends that we'll talk a little bit more about it in a bit, and of course the two running backs are going to have to step up. And then it's led by the quarterback who then, hoping to take that next step and cement himself as not only one of the better quarterbacks in college football, but potentially a first-round pick come April. I know we're talking way ahead. We're talking April 2026 now, but a first-round pick in April's draft because, as you said, big body, big frame, good arm, good athleticism. I wouldn't call him a great athlete, but I would call him has the ability to extend the pocket, has the ability to step up and run, is willing to do it when the opportunity presents itself, doesn't shy away from contact, which I'm sure many NFL scouts and coaches will say, hey, maybe do a little less of that, but he doesn't shy away from contact. And I think all those physical attributes are there. But you bring up an interesting point, and it's one of the notes that I put in our notes today. He had 7 games last year of 70% completion percentage or better, 3 under 60 at 59 or worse. All 3 came in the postseason, where, I think when you talk about Notre Dame, that was an elite level defense, in my opinion, one of the best in college football. Boise State's was good. SMU's was fine. But those are not words that I would use to describe when you're talking about a quarterback who can get to the 70% threshold, failing to get to the 60% threshold. So I think that next step is a big next step for him.
Yeah, I think that, and it's interesting because when I studied Allar in the fall, it was tough to come up with like a comparison, as I'm putting together the Die Hard draft guide, which will be available to all diehards across the entire ALLCITY network, but certainly to our PHLY diehards as well. I'm trying to put a pro comparison with everybody, and I couldn't find one that I felt like great about with Allar. But one quarterback I did kind of, I did write down a couple of times where it's like, there are kind of shades of Sam Bradford. Now, what's interesting about Bradford is that Bradford was very risk averse, especially like as we got into later in his NFL career, was very risk averse, much like Allar. And then also it was a lot of dink and dunk. Like I'm going to take everything underneath. So that resulted in high completion percentage, right? And so to see that Allar didn't quite have that down the stretch in those games, I think that there are a lot of factors at play, as I mentioned, on the field, but I think off the field as well. There was the announcement, I want to say it happened in like November. It was before the end of the regular season where basically everyone took it as like, I'm coming back for 2025, but it wasn't like an ironclad statement. It was more just like, basically eyes are moving forward, like eyes on the prize, moving ahead. I think that there was the potential that if he had a strong playoff run, down the stretch last year that he would have entered the 2025 NFL draft. And, who knows how high he would have gone. I do think that he would have been in play to be the second quarterback off the board. He would have been a first round pick. I feel like Drew Allar, if he had come out last fall or last offseason, that he would have been a round 1 pick ahead of a guy like Jackson Dart. Probably wouldn't have gone ahead of Cam Ward. But I think when you're looking at that factor, that could have been, kind of weighing on him and say, hey, I have to push the envelope a little bit more. And now all of a sudden we see that efficiency drop. You got to course correct here. Now, again, it's a reset button, new season, new set of weapons. Do you feel better about it overall? More continuity along the offensive line. Does he have faith in that group? So that's going to be really interesting to watch. Drew Allar has a lot to gain here, certainly with a strong 2025 season.
And that offensive line, I think, is a huge piece because, I think when you return as many players as you do, James Franklin said he views 7 of their offensive linemen as like quote unquote starters. Obviously, they're only going to start 5, but it allows them to manipulate their offensive line a little bit. It allows guys like Venga Ioana, who does that pull play that they love to run, allow him to almost line up as a tight end if they need him to, or an H-back, and get his big frame in motion and bulldoze somebody into the second level. But when you have that continuity and you bring up the guys, that they return in Nick Dawkins and Drew Shelton, Nolan Rucci, who these are at least legitimate college football offensive linemen, tackles and guards and things like that. I don't know what their NFL careers look like after the college level, but to bring back this many guys, to bring in a couple of transfers, and to feel confident about 7 offensive linemen, that's a really big step for Andy Kotelnicki's offense, because now they can go, all right, we're entrenched in the tackle box. Our quarterback is going to make the right play more times than not. Let's start getting a little creative. Let's start, we don't have Tyler Warren, so maybe we offset those yardage with some more creative stuff. I could see a scenario where Andy Kotelnicki opens up the trick bag a little bit in 2025. And as you said, maybe it's out of necessity. Maybe it's out of allowance because of the amount of talent that they have on offense. But I could see an offensive game plan where it's like, all right, let's run some fun stuff now.
Honestly, if he does it more than he did a year ago, it's going to be one of the wackiest offenses in the country, because they did a lot of it a year ago. It's funny because when I'm watching college football in the fall, and really honestly, like year round, if I'm watching college football, it's usually with an NFL draft focus. Hey, I'm focusing on this player, that player. I'm looking at traits, individuals. And when I'm watching the NFL, yes, I'm looking at traits and individuals, but I'm a little bit more in tune with like the schematics, on both sides of the ball and getting into the X's and O's. When I'm watching Penn State's offense last year, it was just a fun watch. Like, let me let this wash over me a little bit, just because of all the different things that Kotelnicki wanted to work on. They did a ton of misdirection, a lot of creative screens, and unique formations, and guys lined up all over the place. You talked about lining up offensive linemen in the slot and bringing them across the formation. All the things they did with Ola Venga Ioane last year, it was really, really fun, right? It's just unique. You don't see a lot of it. I do think a lot of that was by necessity last year, because they were severely lacking at wide receiver. And they said, all right, this offensive identity is going to be ground and pound. Like, we're going to play smash mouth football with these 2 backs. And then we're going to find every single way possible to get the ball into Tyler Warren's hands. And then all the rest of it is going to be, what a lot of people say, like, it's got to be Mickey Mouse, like create an offense, right? And just find ways to steal yards here and there. I think ideally you'd like to dial that back a little bit. I think to me, like, the funky stuff makes it hard to prepare for on a week to week basis. Sure. Like, there's a lot you got to get ready for. So I hope they do maintain some element of that. I talk about like those offensive linemen. I've done deep dives on 2 of them. I talked about Ioane. He's the guard, number 71. Last year was at left guard. It sounds like he's going to be the right guard this year. I know they were kind of mixing and matching him at a couple different spots. But this guy is big, he's strong, he's powerful, he can move people one-on-one, and he smashes defensive tackles on double teams. He's got a really good anchor to kind of maintain the integrity of that pocket for Drew Allar. There are times where his hands can get a little bit better in the pass game. He can get a little bit off balance at times. But overall, this guy I thought was just rock solid. To me, like, looked like a no brainer. Like, this guy's going to be a starting guard in the NFL. I felt really, really good about Ioane's tape when I studied him a few weeks back. And then the left tackle, Drew Shelton, this was his first year starting, on the blind side there this past year. He's got really light feet. He's really easy out of his stance. The athleticism stood out. He's not a power guy. Having him next to Ioane, they kind of foiled each other well, because Shelton is more of like the wall off player. And then you've got Ioane, who can really, again, just kind of move guys off their spot and really displace. He's a little bit of an undersized tackle, but the athleticism really stood out. He can sink his hips and try and work guys off the ball from a technique standpoint. Does a really good job out in space. And like I said, the tools are there to be a really good pass protector. I know that a really difficult Rucci at right tackle as well. This is a guy with great draft pedigree, or great recruiting pedigree rather. So it comes in and he'll man down that right side. So I'm excited to see what this offensive line looks like. You talk about all the pieces bringing back, and I saw the quote from James Franklin. We've got 7 starters along the offensive line. I remember Jim Harbaugh saying the same thing their national title run in 2022, right? And so I think that there's a lot of reasons to be excited, certainly, about that Penn State offense.
Yeah, and I think you bring up Drew Shelton, a really difficult ask for him, too, as a first-year starter, not only to fill in as a left tackle, but to replace Olu Fashanu, who was a first-round pick the year prior. It's a difficult ask, and I think he filled in pretty admirably in that spot. All right, so we still have some more offensive players to get to. I do want to talk about the running back duo, because I think that is the straw that stirs the drink, how their bread is buttered, whatever food cliche you want to make. That's kind of how Penn State operates, is with the 2 running backs, in the backfield. We'll talk more about how to replace the big-time names. How do you replace Tyler Warren? How do you replace Abdul Carter? And then to end the show before the first game against Nevada this weekend, we're going to talk about the teams that we really like heading into 2025, not just within the Big Ten, but also throughout college football as well. It's the All Nittany Lion podcast here on PHLY. We are brought to you by our friends over at Branded Bills. Use the code BBPHLY to get 15% off your first purchase. And of course, we are broadcasting live from the Xfinity mobile studios. We will be right back after this. All right, let me tell you about our friends over at Branded Bills. I'm super excited to partner with our friends at Branded Bills because, as I said, the hats are clean, they're crisp, and whether you're looking for a snapback, the trucker hat, a fitted hat, the beanie, or if you're looking for something else, you want to get a t-shirt, Branded Bills has you covered with performance and style, because it's gear that makes you stand out from the crowd. Not only are the hats and the t-shirts and the beanies really sweet, but you can get them, as Fran said, pretty much in any college outfit that you're looking for. Of course, you can get your Penn State gear, but even if you want to get something a little bit more obscure, not a Power 5 team, you can get that there as well. Branded Bills has you covered with the best custom headwear in the entire college game. Start your order, and their dedicated team will help you create the exact custom apparel that you're looking for. And of course, they have a partnership with our friends at Penn State as part of their campus collection. So head on over to brandedbills.com. Use that code up in the corner or down below, BBPHLY, for 15% off your first order. Thank you so much to our friends at Branded Bills for not only providing us with some excellent hats, but of course, being our presenting sponsor of today's show as well.
We'll now hear from our friends over at TrueMark Financial, because we're in the middle of back to school season. My son just started first grade this week, so we are right in the thick of things. It's another big year, so you got new classes, new supplies, and of course, all the new sense of independence that comes along with entering first grade as well. And while he's growing up fast, there's a lot changing, but one thing that hasn't changed, back to school shopping adds up. You're talking all the supplies, the book backs, the technical accessories, got to get new sneakers, you got to get new clothes. We're going here, we're going there. We took care of all that this weekend, and all that stuff starts to pile up. And so what I love about it this time around, planning for it with the TrueMark Financial Credit Union debit card that earns rewards. So every time I use my card, I choose credit for those back-to-school purchases, I earn points. So whether that's all the lunch boxes and the headphones, the hoodies, all that stuff that I alluded to earlier, you're racking up points, and all those points, I can redeem them later for cash, for gift cards, travel, and more. I've already spotted a gift card that's going to help cover part of that shopping that we took a big bite out of this past weekend. So it feels great knowing that I'm just getting rewarded just for doing what I was going to do anyway, which was making sure that my son was ready for back to school. So if you are already a TrueMark Financial Credit Union member, be sure to check out your debit card benefits before you start shopping. And if you're not yet a member, I'm telling you, you got to take advantage of this. It's a deal that you do not want to pass up. Now is a great time to join. Just visit one of TrueMark Financial's 24 branches or head over to TrueMark.com. Open an account today. TrueMark Financial, a credit union, is federally insured by NCUA.
All right, welcome back to the PHLY All Nittany Lion podcast. Of course, presented to you by our friends over at Branded Bills. Again, use that code BBPHLY for 15% off your first purchase. Fran, a first grader already?
It's crazy.
Time flies, man, doesn't it?
Yes, it absolutely does. And he's at day 2 right now. But it was funny, like kind of getting a week ago at this time, he was not excited. And then it changed like Thursday, Friday, as we were like, all right, we're getting ready for the back to school shopping. We're like, hey, we're going to go to the store this weekend, but, getting him mentally prepared. And he was like, oh, I can't wait. So I was like, all right. So now he's been excited the last couple of days. So
that's awesome.
It's fun.
Congratulations to you and your family. That is really, really cool. I think you don't realize it. And probably people are tired of hearing me talk about it as well. But like the days are long, but man, the months and years go by very, very quickly.
That's what everybody says. And they are absolutely right about it.
Well, again, congratulations to you.
Thanks,
Hopefully day 2 and the coming days of first grade go really well for your son. Let's get back into this conversation because I think the two that we need to get into that we haven't yet, of course, are Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen, because I think it's probably fair to say, Fran, that both of these guys could be bona fide, legitimate lead back 1A type running backs on a majority of college football teams. And I think it's a testament again to both of them to want to come back and help Penn State win, big games and win a national title perhaps, but to kind of work off of each other because they're very much, you use that cliche like thunder and lightning. They very much are that dynamic duo. Nick Singleton, 1,099 yards last year. Kaytron Allen, 1,108. So they finished 9 yards apart from each other. They finished 34th and 35th. In rushing yards, 6.4 yards a carry for Singleton, 5 yards a carry for Kaytron. And I think when you think about these two guys, I think they are the perfect complement to each other. Nick Singleton is the, home run hitter, second level explosive type of running back. Kaytron is the guy that's going to knock your head clean off and, run you over and then continue for another 3 yards. But they balance each other so well. 20 combined rushing touchdowns, 27 total touchdowns for these two. And between them, between carries and receptions, 213 carries or 213 touches for Nick Singleton, 238 touches for Kaytron Allen. There's no question about it. These two are the preeminent portion of the Penn State offense, especially now without Tyler Warren.
Yeah, and honestly, if you were, to your point about how they complement each other so well, if you were to literally just take the two of them and throw them into a blender, combine them, and spit out one back, he's a top 10 pick. Like that is the
sure.
So when you have those two together in this offense, it really creates one of the best run games in college football, especially when you factor in that offensive line and Koltaniki and all the things that they do to kind of create leverage points for those guys and get those guys in space. And so I do think that both of them, from an NFL draft standpoint, both left me, I would say, not left me wanting, because I really like Kaytron Allen. He is a certain kind of player, not a guy that I think is going to go super high in a draft. Singleton, a lot of people are mocking really high in a draft. I just don't know that he's going to quite get there. I think that there would be some changes to his game that would be required in order for him to reach that kind of draft slot. But that said, I think that when you're looking at the two of these guys, again, they complement each other so well. The reason why I prefer Kaytron Allen, number one, you mentioned the physicality. That certainly stands out. He's a really competitive runner. He's going to drop his shoulder. He's going to be the finisher. He's just always finds a way to stay positive, in terms of positive yardage, not much wasted movement at all. And he typically hits runs exactly where they're going to go or where they should go. He's got a nose for finding creases in tight spaces, 24 touchdowns in his first 3 seasons, despite not being the biggest or the fastest. And that's the thing. He's just not a big play back. He's not, in terms of like triples and home runs, Not happening with Kaytron Allen. He's a singles and doubles hitter. Now, when you go to Singleton, he is your feast or famine, swing for the fences, where there's going to be a lot of like ground outs to second base, and then he's going to hit a home run. And that feast or famine style, some people really like that. That is not necessarily my cup of tea personally. I do think that from a pure physical talent standpoint, he's just got better gifts than Kaytron Allen. I mean, he's 227 pounds. The reported 4.3 time doesn't always show up on tape. It does in spurts every once in a while. So I do think that natural ability is there. I think by the time we get to the combine in February and in March, he's going to test extremely well. So I don't doubt any of that. What I love about it, though, in terms of like their presence in that backfield, Kaytron Allen is the perfect like early downs grinder. And then you get Singleton on third down and you say, all right, like he's a great pass protector, collegiate pass protector. He's got some things to clean up from a technique standpoint, but he gets after it. He's got the size, he's got the power, the technique can improve, but he's very willing. And then as a receiver, very, very underrated. I mean, they can do a lot of different things with him as a pass catcher. They'll move him around the formation, and Koltaniki has gotten really creative with his usage there. So while I think that his vision is not great as a runner, and he'll run into the back of offensive linemen and a lot of wasted steps, and it's blocked up for 7 and he gets 3 because he wasted time getting into the insert point in the run scheme. There's some frustrating plays there with Singleton, but if you block it up well for him and get him downhill, he could be really, really fun. So as a duo, you're going to struggle to find a better one in college football this year. And like I said, I think if you mesh both of them together, you'd have a top 10, top 15 pick in the draft.
Well, I think, last year we talked about, if you ask me what are the best duo running back tandems in college football, I would first point to Ohio State, and I would go to Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins for obvious reasons, both, fairly high draft picks this year. And then I think I would lean Penn State as probably number 2. Without Henderson and Judkins, who both go to the NFL, there is a case to be made that this may be the best 1-2 punch in the running game in college football heading into 2025.
I think so. And I think when you're looking at these guys, like they've got the pelts on the wall to prove it. They were one of 2 FBS duos last year to each hit 1,000 yards. I think when you're looking at it, again, they complement each other so well. The one guy is inconsistent, but he's got all the traits. The other guy doesn't have all the traits, but he's super consistent and tough and grimy, and does everything extremely well. So it's a fun duo. And when they make the run game the focal point of that offense, they are very tough to stop.
And you bring up being a Kaytron fan. I am as well. I have spoken very highly of Kaytron Allen over the years. I think his patience, his vision is really good. You talk about Singleton sometimes maybe kind of trying to get through the hole and into the second level a little bit too quickly and not allowing those things to develop. I think Kaytron as a runner, a little bit more patient in the backfield, kind of see his blocks through. And again, maybe that has a little bit to play because he's not as explosive as Singleton. But the one thing I've always loved about Kaytron is that patience out of the backfield to allow the play to develop in front of him, to allow him to see the opening, see the hole, and get to where he needs to be. Because as you said, not as explosive, but if you're averaging 5 yards a carry, I'm not going to sit here and have any complaints. If you're second best on your team in yards per carry, and you're still getting 5 yards per touch, I mean, I think there was a lot to like about both of these guys' games, but I am also a Kaytron Allen fan for a lot of the reasons you pointed out.
Yeah, I mean, he had 6 games of 15-plus carries last year. Singleton had 1, and I think that it kind of points to even though Singleton is like the bigger back, people might think like, oh, he's the workhorse. No, like Kaytron Allen is the workhorse. He's the guy that is that early downs grinder. 2 of the names that I wrote down while watching him, Damian Harris at Alabama, who he also played in like that kind of a committee when he was down there. But then also Kyron Williams, who was the workhorse for Notre Dame, and again he was a day 3 pick in the NFL draft, going to the Rams, and has become a workhorse in the league. But again, it's kind of similar where breakaway speed, not his bag. He is not going to be a consistent like home run hitter for you in the run game, but he's going to keep you on schedule. He's going to do all the little things well, and you're always going to expect some kind of a net positive gain when you give him the ball. So I think when you're looking at Allen, I think his game projects really well to the NFL, even if the ceiling is not super high.
Well, you talk about Nick Singleton and his ability to catch passes out of the backfield. He actually finished 3rd amongst Penn State receivers last year in receptions. Only Trey Wallace is 46, and then, of course, Tyler Warren's 104. So, I mean, that tells you what the discrepancy was between their top pass catcher and their next guy down was almost 60 receptions. And that's kind of naturally leads us to the next piece of conversation, which is,
Yeah.
how do you replace a player that was as dynamic, as utilized, and as important to your offense as Tyler Warren was? He gets selected 14th overall, and for good reason. He was their do-it-all guy last year. 104 receptions, over 1,200 yards, 8 touchdowns, 218 rushing yards, 4 rushing touchdowns. Finished 7th in the Heisman, won the Mackey, was first-team All-American, first-team Big Ten. You can name pretty much all of his accolades from a season ago. He was their everything in terms of, like, line this guy up all over the field. And I know you did a ton of extensive scouting on Tyler Warren for the draft process. So really, I'll just give you kind of my overview, and I want to hear what your thoughts on the player that Tyler Warren was and how do you replace him. To me, the biggest thing with him is he's kind of matchup proof, at least at the college level, because teams tried to scheme to take him away, and some had a modicum of success, but not a ton, because you have the ability to line him up in so many different positions. He's got size, good hands, he tracked well, decent speed. He lined up, obviously, an inline tight end in the slot as the H-back. He lined up as the quarterback. He lined up as the center and caught a touchdown pass because apparently that was a legal play. To me, it was just the flexibility in using Tyler Warren, not just because he was really, really good, but because he felt a little almost matchup proof at the college level that makes him so difficult to replace.
Yeah, and I think that there's something to be said for, when you look at Colton Nicky and say, all right, well, do all these same things, but now you're going to do it with Dinkins, or you're going to do it with any of these receivers. Maybe it's a mix and match of everything, right? But just being able to try and make some chicken salad or make some lemonade out of things that were, it's not a great, you're not pulling from the most full pantry here. I think that when you're looking at what he was able to do last year, it was really, really impressive, Colton Nicky, with Tyler Warren, who, top 15 pick, all the ability in the world, checks all the boxes, wasn't like a athlete, right? Like a very athletic, but not the type of guy that's going to go, in the top 10 and say like, he's not Kyle Pitts, right? Who just tore up the SEC because of his game breaking ability. He was a guy that was just like really tough and rugged and caught everything. His hands really improved from 2023 to 2024, really cut the drops down. His route running took a next step. He was always a really strong blocker. And look, that tight end room has always been really, really good, and it continues to be really, really good. I talked with Warren at the Combine this year and was just asking him about some of these other tight ends that are coming up through the pipeline. Dinkins made it to the freak list this year. I know that they've got a young tight end who's a true sophomore going into this season that they are raving about internally, and Luke Reynolds, who there's a lot of reasons to be excited about this kid. So I think when you're looking at that room, I would still expect them to be productive. Are any of them going to be what Tyler Warren was last year, just solely this season? That's unlikely. I think that maybe Luke Reynolds, you're hoping that he becomes that down the road. But if you factor those two guys, and I know that they've got more in that room as well, with 3 transfers at receiver, so all right, let's kind of throw this in and we'll see what we can come up with it.
I almost am hesitant to do this because it's so corny, but I use the analogy of Moneyball and, the scene in Moneyball where they say, we're not trying to replace Giambi, we're trying to recreate Giambi in the aggregate. And I think that's probably how Penn State will take a look at this. You bring up those two guys. I think Khalil Dinkins probably gets shot number 1 at being tight end number 1. But I think you're going to see him. There's going to be some formations where maybe he's in the slot and Reynolds is lined up, in line as the tight end, maybe vice versa at times if they want to try to create some matchup problems with Reynolds in the slot. And I think Andre Rappleyea is another name. He's their 3rd tight end. He's a younger guy, but I think it's a guy that they may end up using as well. I think he's a guy they really have high hopes on. I think Reynolds, as you brought up, is probably the guy that may have the best chance to pop and be bona fide number 1. But I think the way that they're going to go about this in the interim, at least, is to interchange at least the top 2 and maybe the top 3 guys to matchups that they really like and kind of create Tyler Warren in the aggregate.
I think that they have the potential to be successful in there. I think that he's a little bit easier to try and replicate than what they lost in Abdul Carter, which we'll get to. But I think when you're looking at, again, the transfers, the new additions, the young players ascending, I think that they could find a way to be able to get there, especially if Drew Allar can take some of those steps that we talked about a little bit earlier. I do want to quickly just because I did watch some Trevor Pena film.
Okay.
Pena was extremely productive at Syracuse this past year. He led, they were the #1 pass game in all of college football from a number standpoint, and he was their leading receiver. 84 catches, 940 yards, 9 touchdowns, has been an impactful return man throughout his career. I know that James Franklin said this week that he's going to be in the mix as a kick return punt returner as well for this team. But when you're looking at Pena, 5'10", 186 pounds. So he's undersized. He's been mostly a slot guy, but he's not like the crafty, find a soft spot and zone slot receiver. He is your move player. Like, get him on the run, get him in space, get him the football. I don't think he's going to create a ton of separation on his own. I don't think that he plays through contact particularly well early in the down or midway through the route. He actually did a pretty good job maintaining receptions after taking a hit, but all the other areas through contact, I don't think that he excelled all that well. So he's a player that I think you want to try and scheme open. Thankfully, he's going to a system where I have a lot of confidence that he's going to get schemed open. They're going to find ways to be able to get him the football. And so I am excited to see what Pena looks like in this offense. And again, even if he is not the guy that, if it's 3rd and 8 and he's running a dig route, like if you took Pena and put him in that spot in Notre Dame last year and he's running that, I don't think that's his bag. But if you're talking about, hey, let's take some of the creativity that we use with Tyler Warren, let's transfer that over to Pena, and we'll find other ways to be able to use him as well. I think that could be a really useful scenario for him and a good role for him in this offense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought it up. It's an entirely new receiving core, not just at the tight end position, but at the receiver position as well. Last year, as we said, Tyler Warren, their #1 pass catcher. #2 was Trey Wallace at 46 receptions. He now plays at Ole Miss. #3 was Nick Singleton, 41. The 4th leading receiver was Omari Evans, who I had a lot of really high expectations for. I thought when he got in space, he was a really, really good player, but he only ended up with 21 receptions. He's now at Washington. After that, you talk about Liam Clifford, who's still at Penn State, but you're talking about now 18 receptions for him, for Katron Allen, 14 for Dinkins. Julian Fleming, who came over from Ohio State a year prior, was really underwhelming in his one season with Penn State, just 14 catches. So you bring up Pena, you bring up Kyron Hudson, you bring up Devontae Ross. This is an entirely new wide receiver core. I think of the intrigue surrounding the offense, the receiver core is really going to be the big piece, because for the first time in what feels like the NIL transfer portal era, Penn State went out and spent some significant money at the wide receiver position because of the shortcomings that they saw last year at that position.
Yeah, I mean, look, they had to make moves, and I think that James Franklin, they have not been historically like hyperactive in the portal. They don't go, but they're going to pick their spots. And at receiver, I think they knew they had to pick their spots. You lose Keandre Lambert-Smith last year. They didn't have a suitable replacement for him in-house. And so now you go out and you get Pena, you get Ross, who's been banged up this summer. So I think it'll be a little bit of a slow burn, maybe not until the end of September where we really kind of get to see him at full bore. But I do think that some of these pieces will be very interesting. I just hope that one of those 3 can just become like a go-to reliable guy for Allar, where when it's 3rd and 7, it's 3rd and 8. Who am I going to have confidence in where I can really cut this loose? And that's what I'm hoping that we could see from one of these 3 players.
To your point, that was Tyler Warren last year.
Yes, exactly. And so I'm hoping that one of these receivers can step up to be that guy.
All right, so on the other side, you brought up Abdul Carter. We're going to try to figure out how do you replace the #3 overall pick in the NFL draft. It's not an easy task by any means. So we'll do that on the other side. Talk a little bit more about the defense as we get you set for Penn State and Nevada at 3:30 on Saturday afternoon, game 1 of the 2025 season. It is the All Nittany Lion podcast. We're brought to you by our friends over at Branded Bills. And, of course, we are broadcasting live from the Xfinity mobile studios. We will be right back after this. All right, let me tell you about our friends over at Cherry Hill Kia, because, listen, I've been trying to tell you about Cherry Hill Kia for a while now. I think, first and foremost, their complex in person is a beautiful place to go. But if you're looking to shop online, I totally understand. Head on over to KiaofCherryHill.com, because you can choose from over 450 different new Kias, including the Telluride, the Sportage, K5, Carnival, Seltos, Soul, and so much more. It is the hottest automotive brand in the country for a reason. 7 of their models received a 2025 Car and Driver Editor's Choice Award, which is amazing considering the fact that of the 450 models tested, only 20 industry-wide received this award. You're talking about 35% of the awards going to Kia. Combine that with the best warranty in the automotive business, which is 10-year, 100,000-mile powertrain and 5-year, 60,000-mile bumper-to-bumper. You've got offers that you simply can't miss. Stop in today, tell them the PHLY sent you, and you'll get a $100 restaurant.com gift card just for taking a test drive or completing a trade appraisal. Listen, I know people buy Kias elsewhere. I just don't know why. Drive home in your new Kia today, just minutes from all bridges or readily available online 24/7 at kiaofcherryhill.com.
We'll now hear from our friends over at where you got an outlet that you said you'd fix last year, or maybe look, we're getting towards the end of the HVAC. We're worried about the AC, but it's starting to get cold out. It's going to start to get chilly, which means you're going to be starting to fire up that heater. Is that buttoned up? Is that ready to go? Is everything else, as you get your house ready for the fall and for the winter, you want to make sure that everything is ready to go. And there is no one better to take care of all of that than Ace Hardware Home Services, because they are not just the helpful hardware folks. They are also the helpful home service and repair folks. From plumbing and electrical to heating and cooling, they've got the trusted pros to keep your home humming all year long. Ace Hardware Home Services, they are bringing helpful home, the helpful you love, from the store now to your front door, from Philly all the way to the Jersey Shore. Visit Ace Hardware Home Services online at acehardwarehomeservices.com to get you started on your next project.
All right, welcome back to the All Nittany Lion podcast here on PHLY, brought to you by our friends over at Branded Bills. Of course, use that code BBPHLY, for 15% off. All right, so let's switch sides of the field. We'll talk now about Abdul Carter, who was the number 3 overall pick in last year's NFL draft. Here are just some of the accolades that you have to replace before we even talk about the player that Abdul Carter is. 2024 Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, consensus 2024 All-American, led not only the Big Ten, but college football in TFLs last year with 24. Last season, 12 sacks, which was second in the Big Ten, 23 throughout his career as well. I mean, talk about a game disruptor, the type of guy that changes the outcome of a game in both the run and the pass. And I think all you have to do is look towards the college football playoff, where he was effectively playing with one arm through the second half of the Boise State game and in the Notre Dame game, and was still wildly effective because of how good he was. Fran, again, another guy you did a lot of extensive tape work on, an elite edge rusher who moved from the linebacker position. You could see it a little bit in the beginning of the year in the West Virginia game and the Bowling Green game. Like, took him a little bit of time to become a natural edge, but the athleticism was always there. The skill set was always there. And once that light bulb went off, the best edge rusher in college football, and it's why he went number 3 overall. Again, another guy, like, I'll ask you kind of point blank, how do you replace a guy like Abdul Carter?
Yeah. I remember, to your point, 51 weeks ago, sitting in this chair and saying, like, all right, it's I got all my college football film from this past Saturday. Week 1 is in the books. Who am I going to watch? Hey, you know what? Like, huge point of intrigue coming into the season was Abdul Carter. Where everyone had high hopes for what he was going to look like off the edge, but he was moving from off-ball linebacker. What was it going to look like? And so I turned on the film, and I'm sitting here and I'm watching. I'm like, oh yeah, like you're cooking with gas with what this kid's got, because you talk about the quickness and the explosiveness, but also just like the hands, like you could tell he was still working through it and he was trying things out for the first time, but there was something there that he can continue to work on. And he only got better as the season went on. I was a little worried early that it would be like, all right, he might just be more of like a designated pass rusher type. But the more I watch, I'm like, yeah, like, he's going to be an every down player. He's not bashful about playing against the run. You talk about like the toughness, that ability to fight through injury the way he did down the stretch last year. So I'm excited to see what he looks like moving forward. Obviously, Eagles fans hoping it's not too good, because considering he's playing for the Giants now. But if preseason is any indicator, he's going to be an outstanding player for that team. So I think when you're looking at Carter, trying to replace him, it's going to be difficult. I think that this is a much harder task than trying to replace what Tyler Warren brought to the offense, only because, look, you got a new defensive scheme as well. We should talk about that with Jim Knowles coming in from Ohio State. So it's going to be a little bit of a different look than what Penn State fans have seen in the past. But I think when you're looking at it, you're going to lean on some of these upperclassmen. You know, deny Dennis Sutton. he was banged up for a good chunk of last year. What does he look like now that he's fully healthy? You're hoping that Zane Durant on the inside, he could take that next step. And we'll talk through some of these guys, but I think, yeah, you're hoping that more so than with the offensive side of the ball, I think you're hoping on one of these guys really ascending to take that next step. It's unlikely that any of them become what Carter became, but if you can get one of those guys to get from like a green player to a blue player, now you're cooking there with Jim Knowles.
And now you're talking about, as you brought up, with Jim Knowles being the new defensive coordinator, you're talking about a third defensive coordinator in 3 seasons for Penn State. Manny Diaz a couple years prior, Tom Allen last season, now Jim Knowles. And an interesting departure from Ohio State, I think, for Knowles, because obviously you go to a rival, you just won the national championship. It's a little bit of an interesting call. I think Penn State probably, again, for the first time in a while, opened up the checkbook and said, we need to figure out how to make this thing stick and become a legitimate national title contender. But it is a third defensive coordinator in 3 years. And I know, Fran, you talk all the time about Jalen Hurts and his offensive coordinator carousel that he's gone through for basically his entire adult playing career, dating all the way back to Alabama, through Oklahoma, through his time with the Eagles. I have to imagine it can be a little bit disruptive for a player and a positional group to go through this many different iterations of a coaching tree and a coaching staff. So when you talk about not only losing your best defensive player, but also a new defensive scheme, I have to imagine that's a difficult kind of task to work through.
It certainly can be, and it comes down to what the new scheme is going to ask certain players to do. It might be harder for some and easier for others, and obviously on an individual basis, some guys pick things up faster than others. But I think when you're looking at this defensive scheme, when I think of the guys up front, when I think of Durant and I think of Deni Dennis Sutton, all right, pin your ears back, get upfield. Sutton will probably drop a little bit more than maybe what he was accustomed to. You saw a little bit of that with some of those Ohio State edge rushers, but most often they're going to be moving forward. I think the bigger thing is all right, for the holdovers at linebacker and at safety, those positions working the middle of the field, at nickel corner, which, James Franklin talked about that this week as well, that they're going to be more of a base nickel team. They're playing more nickel, more sub package than what we've seen in the past, where they felt more comfortable staying with 3 linebackers on the field because you had that athleticism there. But Knowles, he's traditionally said, all right, we're going to use a nickel. And he's had, obviously, when you watch Ohio State over the years, they've had different body types at that nickel corner spot. So that will be interesting to watch. But I think when you're looking at Wheatley at safety, you're looking at Rojas at linebacker. He just said this week, James Franklin, who's going to wear the green dot? I was glad that he was asked that. Last year, college football instituted the green dot, basically allowing helmet to helmet communication from the sideline to the field. Who's going to be that guy for Penn State? It's going to be a mix of Dom DeLuca at linebacker, but then also I think it's Amari Thomas, right, from UNC, Amari Campbell from UNC. He comes over as a transfer, and he's wearing the green dot in his first season. So it won't be Rojas. It'll be Campbell and DeLuca being the communicators there as the Mike linebacker. To me, that's where the impetus is put on those guys working the middle of the field. So you look at Wheatley at safety, who's a ball hawking guy, started every game last year. A lot of high hopes for what he could be moving forward into his final season with Penn State. He got there as a corner early on, made the transition, was a backup for his first couple of years, and now is going to be in his second year as a starter. You factor in Campbell with Rojas, who's extremely athletic and made a lot of big plays for that defense a year ago. I'm excited to see what that back seven looks like. We didn't even talk about A.J. Harris at corner.
Yeah.
So, it's a talented group that he's got, that Jim Knowles has to work with.
Yeah, obviously, that's the one we said, the 14 returning starters, just 5 for Penn State. But if you add in Campbell to the mix, it allows you to have another veteran, another, guy who's been around the group. But you did lose Abdul Carter. You lose KJ Winston, who I know missed a lot of time last year with injury, but is still a legitimate, NFL caliber safety. You lose some guys. Jaden Reed is gone as well. Yep. It's going to be about replenishing, and that's kind of the role of college football, as is every year. It's not new just to Penn State. It's not new just to this year. It's about retool and replenish, because this time last year, I remember talking about who was going to kind of step up in the linebacker position, and the guy that you brought up was the guy that we were curious to see how he grows as a player, was Tony Rojas. And I think there was a lot to like about Tony Rojas's game last year. Really good side-to-side stuff. I thought closed out well. I think, he was kind of growing into his role as one of the I want to see, obviously not wearing the green dot, but kind of as a leader of one of the second level. But I think, you're trying to figure out now this year, who's that guy that steps up, because you have your core of returnees. As you said, AJ Harris is stepping in. And then, of course, Denai Dennis-Sutton, Zane Durant. It's a group. It's a really good defensive line group that had so much depth last year that, you lose some good players, no question. But I think you have the ability to kind of not replace Abdul Carter, of course, but to not lose a ton as a collective unit with the guys that do return.
Yeah, I think it's a good call. And I think when you're looking at that group, Rojas, I think it's going to be fascinating because when you look at his skill set, with his size and his athleticism, Bruce Feldman from The Athletic, he was, I think, 30th overall on his freaks list this year as one of the top athletes in college football. Last year in Ohio State, or the last couple of years at Ohio State, Jim Knowles had a player in the middle of that defense named Sonny Styles, who's still there in Columbus, a senior linebacker, one of the best linebackers in college football. Last year, he had 11 TFLs and 6 sacks. And when you look at his explosiveness, I think that there's some similarities in terms of the usage there. And there were some really good reps. When you watch Styles, like they manned him up on running backs and tight ends. He had really easy ability to match guys in space. Didn't have a ton of ball production and coverage, but he was a really good blitzer from depth. They would put him down on the line of scrimmage and he'd run stunts with defensive linemen. I would expect to see some of that with Rojas this year. I think there's some similarities there from a skill set standpoint, and when you factor that in with like the athleticism of Zane Durant, who was another freak list guy at defensive tackle, he got to Penn State as like a 265-pound defensive end from Florida, and they just continue to add weight. And he's extremely athletic. He was a guy that really stood out for me when I studied them on film last year. The athletic traits are outstanding for a guy that big. He's now just under 300 pounds. He's going to run in the 4.6s. So I think when you're looking at Zane Durant, Dennis Sutton being healthy, you mix in Rojas coming from the second level, they've got some juice there. Now it's going to be, can any of these other guys, can a redshirt freshman come out of nowhere, and kind of take that next step? I know they've got some young players. They brought in Anai White, who's a junior transfer player as well. Can Jalen Harvey, can he take that next step? Can Jordan Mayer take that next step? So it's going to be interesting. I know James Franklin, they like to bring guys in waves. That's that they did at Ohio State as well. They're going to need to, I think, to try and see if they can find that next Abdul Carter.
Yeah, and I think, when you talk about the back end of the defense, obviously the secondary, to me, I think one guy that could be that next level, that next jump guy is Day Lane, the sophomore safety, who you saw in spurts last year make some big plays. I think is going to have an opportunity now as I don't want to say unquestioned starter, but pretty darn close to being an unquestioned starter. I think, with Wheatley next to him, it allows him to maybe play a little bit more aggressively if Wheatley can be the, veteran presence as that in that safety group. And then, of course, Zion Tracy opposite AJ Harris, who is now going to move into a full-time nickel corner role.
Yep.
He was there last year a lot, but he's going to kind of play there full time this year.
Yeah.
I think he has some big play upside as well. So Day Lane and Zion Tracy, to me, and the backside of this defense, the back four, I think could be really, really intriguing pieces for this defense, especially if the front four is able to get home like we kind of expect it to.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest, man. Like when I watched AJ Harris a few weeks back, studying him, it was his first year as a starter last year. He's a former 5-star kid at Georgia, played there, and then transferred to Penn State. And all right, shows up. And as a sophomore last year, I thought he looked really, really good, man. Like, look, I know
Sure.
He didn't make a ton of big plays on the ball. He had 1 interception and 5 PBUs on the year. And they had kind of like a weird platoon at corner where they were kind of rotating guys around. AJ Harris has next level ability. Like he could be a first-round pick. He could be like the second or third corner off the board by the time we get to next April or the following April. So I think when you're looking at Harris, I saw starting potential certainly in the NFL. So they've got talent on the back end of that defense.
All right, so as we wrap up this first episode of the All Nittany Lion podcast, I like to do this every year. This is for fun. Nobody's holding you to anything here, Fran. Your answers are subject to change as early as next week. But I'm going to ask you 3 questions surrounding the entire landscape of college football. I'm curious your answers. Viewing it not just from a college football fan and a scout, but like looking at it from that next level conversation as well. The first question to you is, on August 26th, the 2025 Heisman Trophy winner is...
I think it's going to be Arch Manning. I know we had a small sample size. That's probably the chalk answer. My guess is, I haven't looked at the Bet365 Heisman odds yet, but my guess is the Arch is probably the prohibitive favorite. But I think when you're looking at him, the talent is undeniable. The tools are outstanding. And then to me, like, Steve Sarkisian is up there as one of the best offensive minds in college football. Yes, they're turning over basically a brand new offensive line, new weapons, all that, no question. That said, I expect Arch Manning to have a big year. I expect Texas to have a big year. So they are going to be one of the other teams, in that Final Four mix along with Penn State.
The other name that I have been heavily considering in that question, I think you like this guy at the quarterback position, is Garrett Nussmeier.
Yes.
Out of LSU. I think that he, at his ceiling, could be a legitimate bona fide, first round pick, potential number one overall pick type of guy. Next question for you. On August 26th, the 2025 national champion will be? I know.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Let me rephrase it. Maybe that's not fair to ask. I will ask you this instead. The 2025 team that you expect to make a deep run. And asking for the champion is hard. Team that expect to make a deep run.
Look, I think it's a fair question. My gut initially just goes to Texas because I've got that level of faith in that. Now, defensively, they're bringing up. They had a lot of young guys that made a lot of big plays last year. The big thing is that, and this is concerning for a team like Texas. You mentioned Garrett Nussmeier. They're doing the same thing at LSU as well. They lost a lot from the offensive line, man.
Sure.
Even like pass catchers, they've lost. So there's a lot of turnover there. So, and with Arch stepping in as the first time as the starter, it's probably a big ask. That said, we have seen this before. I had the conversation. I'm trying to remember if it was on camera or not, but it was when's the last time we saw a freshman, a redshirt freshman, come in and win the Heisman and lead? It's all right, well, Jameis Winston did it. Johnny Manziel did it. Tim Tebow was a big part of that. Those guys, it does happen. So that's my gut, is that it would be the Texas Longhorns.
So the other team, and I know you don't like this team's quarterback at the professional level, but I love their defense.
No question.
I think Clemson is going to be a legitimate national title threat this year. I know you're not a huge Kate Klubnik fan, but I think at the college level, Klubnik provides some stability, and I think that team is going to be really, really good.
Really good college quarterback, and the guy that I compared him to in my write-up was Aaron Murray, who Aaron Murray was leading Georgia to title runs, right?
Sure.
And he just was a fourth round pick, and wasn't like a long-term NFL stakeholder. So I think when you're looking at Klubnik, I think he is absolutely capable of leading that offense and that team. I do think that's going to be a defensive-driven team, but I think that they absolutely will be in that Final Four mix.
All right, last question for you, and this will tie into your NFL draft coverage. I know you've already started because you don't stop, and you are the best in the business for a reason. The number one overall pick in next year's 2026 NFL draft will be?
I think it's going to be Garrett Nussmeier. I think I'm going to have a mock draft that's going to come out hopefully by the end of this week, getting ready for week 1 in college football. I'm not going to put Arch in there. I'm going to have a full write-up on Arch Manning. He's going to be written up. I'm just not going to include him in mock drafts just because it doesn't seem like he's going to come out.
Sure.
So I'm not going to put him in there. I will put Garrett Nussmeier in there. Now, if LSU doesn't have a great year, then maybe that doesn't happen. But look, we just saw that with Cam Ward, where they had a great start to the year at Miami, and then they kind of fizzled and didn't make the playoff. So it certainly could happen with Nussmeier, where it's a similar kind of narrative there with LSU. They fall short, but he still goes number one.
Could certainly be intriguing to see the kid that plays in Baton Rouge to potentially maybe stay in New Orleans.
Yeah, that's a good point. Play for his dad.
Because I think that not only the Saints, probably thinking about the Saints and a handful of other teams, and the Browns are probably in that mix as potential number one overall pick. Considerees. But this is our first episode of the All Nittany Lion podcast. This was a lot of fun, Fran. I'm looking forward to doing this with you each and every Tuesday. Penn State and Nevada, 3:30 this weekend. We didn't break the game down too much. I think when you think about these non-conference games early in the year with a team like Penn State, expectations are that they should win this game. No disrespect to the opponent. We talked a lot about that last year on the show, but I think the expectation for Penn State at this point is you should win this game fairly comfortably.
Go in, handle business, answer questions in terms of the Tyler Warren and Abdul Carter stuff. Hopefully we have a little bit more to chew on by the time we get to next week after watching this game.
And if I could not have a Bowling Green type game in the non-conference schedule this year, that would be great. Just for my own personal mental state. But Fran, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. We will talk again next Tuesday. The All PHLY, the PHLY Eagles podcast, of course, is where you can find Fran throughout the week as well. And of course, all of the All-City NFL draft coverage throughout the football season and into the draft process. So Penn State, Nevada, 3:30. We'll be back on next Tuesday at 5 o'clock as well. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. And we will talk to you on the All Nittany Lion podcast, which is brought to you by our friends over at Branded Bills. Use that promo code BBPHLY for 15% off. Broadcasting live from the Xfinity mobile studios. We will be back next Tuesday for Penn State FIU preview, and we'll break down the game against Nevada. We'll talk to you then right here on PHLY and the All Nittany Lion podcast. See ya.
We all silly like the mayor.